And but that's for me. That's not for the community. These are the things that I have to bring with me when I conceive a work and try to be as thorough as possible in running through all the possibilities that one can think about, and then trying to decide, even when you want to provoke, that you are setting out to provoke. It's, you know, it surprises me when people provoke and sort of give the impression that they didn't realize they were going to provoke. It should be part of the articulation of the idea to know that you may be provoking, whether you intend to do so or not. At this point, what I should do, in fact, is simply talk about maybe 2 or 3 works that I've made in different places. I mean, the temptation might be to talk about the documental work, but I think that there was just there's so much media and press about it that people could probably just go online and read about it. I can summarize what happened there. When I was approached to make this work in Documenta, in fact, this was the work that I proposed, because it was the idea that I was bringing to Documenta. It wasn't necessarily a particular form. And we ran into resistance. In this case, what we thought was technical resistance. Eventually, I discovered that it was in fact political resistance. It wasn't technical, but we were told you can't put it here, you can't put it there, we won't be able to, you know, it's dangerous for the trains, it's going to fall on people's heads, and so on and so forth. So we ran out of possibilities in terms of siting. And again, in this case, you know, we're coming into a blank slate in terms of sites. There wasn't a predetermined site to insert this thing. We're going to look around and see what works, and which is a bit complicated for an artist to work with. In this case, anyway, this fell through, and we were just sitting in Athens, in fact, you know, sitting in a cafe and thinking, what are we going to do now? At which point I just said, how about we do an obelisk, you know, because it gives us 4 sides to, instead of making just 1 wall of text, we can make 4 walls of text. How about that? And everyone jumped up and down, and they said, yeah, that's really great. We'll just put a needle in the middle of the city and see how they respond to it. That was not why I came up with the idea of the obelisk. It was, in fact, the fact that it expanded the possibilities of engaging different communities in the town using 4 walls. Because on this part of town, you have a concentration of Turkish citizens in Castle. On this other side, you have a concentration of the wealthier natives in Castle. On the other side, you have a concentration of a mixture of people from Islamic countries and so on and so forth. You know, and we just thought, well, the English doesn't really matter, so we can face it anywhere. You know? But these are the 4 most widely spoken languages in Castle: Turkish, Arabic, English, and obviously German. That's how we arrived at that. This is the other thing that happens with work in the public space, is at this point, at the point that I proposed the idea, it wasn't a political work, because all people knew was that there was now going to be an obelisk. And they instantly embraced the idea, because they were now going to be on the same level as Washington, D.C. and Rome and so on. They're going to have their own obelisk, like every decent global city, you know, has an obelisk. And the words were then put on 4 days before opening. It was at that point that it changed from being a desirable marker in the center of town to a divisive intervention from elsewhere. We fought with the city and so on and so forth, and I can't I can't really, I'll take all evening to go into all of that. I have to find the English. Oh, this is the Turkish. Okay, it says, I was a stranger and you took me in. And this is a passage from the Bible. So anyways, what else happened with this work, because it resonated with communities within the community. It resonated with exile communities because it was in fact based on an earlier exile community, and the space where we put it in, the square that we put it into, was designed by the grandson of one of the Huguenots who came in the 16th century. So it was an exiled community contribution to the city of Kassel. So it seemed to make sense. At least we thought so. What I did not fully anticipate was how it also touched, or rather dipped into the very fresh politics of 2015 and Angela Merkel's policy about immigration and refugees. I wasn't thinking about that, quite frankly, and that was a mistake on my part because, in the thoroughness of my research, I was looking farther into history than closer to, because at the end of the day, the immigration question and the refugee question is an endless, timeless question. It's not topical. It's not topical. There's the myth of baby Jesus being taken to Egypt because he was going to be killed by some king or something, and an angel told his father, you better take him and run to Egypt and find refuge. So 2,000 years ago, if this person did ever live, there was that. In the Hebrew mythology, Moses and his people were also refugees in what is now the Islamic world in Egypt. It wasn't Islamic at the time, but it is now. So it's for me, it wasn't a topical thing, but it just happened to come too soon after the controversies around Greece and the European Union and Angela Merkel and the German thing. But because it resonated with all these communities, with women in Turkish hair salons saying, we can't believe this is happening. It's that Turkish there. We can't believe it. People then became passionate in their sense of ownership. So when there was resistance from the far-right political party, people were willing to defend the work. And they were having meetings there, they were having demonstrations, they were having all sorts of community discussions and so on and so forth. I was safely in the United States or wherever else I was, feeling lucky and somewhat satisfied that we were able to make a work that now has a life of its own, and that somehow we were able to tap into a sense of ownership in the community where they could carry on with defending the work. As some of you know, eventually the work was, we sort of lost out because the work was removed. The city basically tore down the work in the middle of the night with police presence and all that, because they were afraid that there might be some kind of response. So we went from people enjoying the work to having an empty space. But guess how people responded to that? This was one of the responses. It turned into almost a memorial site. And what was the city's response? They moved in quickly and cleared it out completely, and then plastered over it, and then put tiles over it, so that just like they do when they're afraid that a cult might develop around someone's grave or something. Politicians go and do that. So when these things happen, I feel not just a sense of success, but also a sense of